So welcome everyone to our eighth class on George Bernanos and his novels. We've read Under the Son of Satan. We've read Diary of a Country Priest. We've read Mouchette. And here our last novel is what many consider his greatest, but there's room for argument, Monsieur Ouine. And I want to try to pull some things together here for everyone, this being our final class and Bernanos being difficult and has been a challenge for all of us. So I frankly have become rather, if not obsessed, driven by the difficulty that he presents to us and really want to try to feel like we have some sort of firm foundation upon which to continue to read Bernanos. Because I plan on reading the other novels like The Imposture. I read Joy many years ago, but I'll go back and read that again. So with that in mind, if you don't mind, I'd like to make these remarks. So let's start with the basics. To understand the writer, George Bernanos, we have to begin with three basic facts about his life. I think if you look at his life through these particular lenses, you begin to see how some of these confusing parts begin to form pieces of the puzzle. First, he enjoyed an idyllic childhood in the village of Fressin in northwest France, in a region called the Pas de Calais, not that far from the Atlantic Ocean. Second, he believed deeply in the Catholic faith in which he had been raised, which was reinforced by the piety and love of his beloved mother, Hermance, who was a descendant, yes, of Joan of Arc. And thirdly, his attitude toward life, his church, and his beloved home country of France were shattered by his experience in the trenches of the Somme and Verdun in World War I. He witnessed day after day an unnecessary slaughter after over-the-top orders were given by an officer corps who thought more about the pride and honor of France than the lives of its young men. Many of them had hoped to revenge the loss in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 and the humiliating occupation of Paris by the Hun. They had fought in that war and have never forgotten that humiliation. In those trenches, Bernanos saw innocents destroyed on a daily basis by what he called the old men, who had no regard for the lives and futures of France's young men. The old men included not only the politicians and military men, but also the church leadership who supported their fellow old men in the name of Catholic France. The war changed Bernanos forever. After struggling with despair, his experience made him an even more committed Catholic, but one willing and able to call out his mother church for its false allegiances and its compromises with the petty bourgeois. So willing was he to denounce his own country, Bernanos moved his family out of France to Spain and eventually to a Brazilian jungle where he lived for 7 years. From there, he shot out missive after missive, broadcast after broadcast to a nation that did not listen. Bernanos became a prophet. His message was simple at the surface. France must embrace its lost identity, its lost monarchy, and in doing so, reconfirmed its Catholic past. France, in other words, must be reborn under the flag of its saint, Joan of Arc. His reputation had been built on the success of two novels, Under the Star of Satan, 1926, and The Diary of a Country Priest, 1936. Bernanos had been hailed the equal of Dostoevsky by no less than Paul Claudel. Like the author of the brothers Karamazov, his subject was good and evil, God and the devil. Out of the slaughter of the innocent he witnessed in the war, childhood innocence itself became his symbol of spiritual recovery, the door to redemption, the recovery of the purity we all desire. This is why the curé in Monsieur Ouine says to Dr. Malapine, quote, rather than the obsession with impurity, you do better to fear the nostalgia for purity. Why? It would obliterate the doctor's scientific and deterministic worldview, which rules out any sort of infinite desire. Hey, Brittany. Hi, Brittany.
Hey.
But after any easy generalizations, the complexity of Bernanos' message is encountered by the readers in his depiction of post-war France, where different kinds of trenches have been dug, trenches of isolation. What he sees is a France, and all human existence for that matter, lost in a mire, literally. A mire which is a concoction of self-interest, status-seeking, pleasure-seeking, materialistic greed and boredom. But if a prophet is a novelist, he must employ indirectly. He cannot preach, or at least he must let any preaching come from the mouths of his characters. Monsieur Ouine, Monsieur Ouine, not Monsignor, acts the role of a secular priest, preaching his crafty cynicism while the doctor and the mayor opine publicly on what makes the world tick. But even among the competing voices, the form of his fiction, especially Monsieur Ouine, follows few straight lines. His attempt at writing in straight lines to become more accessible in The Crime, 1935, was a failure. His voice was tuned to the fallen actuality of existence and couldn't conform to the template of a detective novel. Readers of Bernanos must come to appreciate that the form of his fiction corresponds to the world he depicts, a chaos of atomistic individuals seeking their own self-interest, ignoring the well-being of others and their community. Bernanos despised facilité, meaning ease. He despised ease in fiction. He viewed his novels as a kind of spiritual exercise for the reader, just as it has been for the writer. Now, how can a writer attempting to reveal the pervasiveness of evil and sloth accomplish that dialectically or abstractly in such a way that we can read once and forget, like the morning news headlines? Form helps to convey meaning, not necessarily to make it clearer, but to put form and content in alignment, which leaves a deeper mark on the reader. Let's recall here that Bernanos was never a Manichaean, viewing the world as a struggle between the powers of light and dark, good and evil. He viewed evil as nothingness, presaged by the experience of nihilism and despair. The devil, who shows up in Under the Son of Satan, represents no higher power. His wily and gratuitous deceptions prick the earnest conscience of Abbé Donasson, and he turns his back on the pesky horse trader. We never see, however, the direct connection, the cause and effect between Ouine and the village, whose persuasive ennui, boredom, has erupted into madness after finding the dead young boy in a muddy stream. Madame Marchal, the midwife to the dying Monsieur Ouine, tells Steenie, "You'd think this whole miserable village had been put under a spell, since the murder of the little cowherd is not recognizable anymore, I swear." Ouine's connection to the town is seen in manifestations of condemnation, fury, and insanity, issuing forth in acts of cruelty, murder, and suicide. This is a connection he does not deny. In fact, he brags about it, saying, "I was hungry only for souls." The spiritual emptiness of the village is further exemplified by the constant encroachment of water, which becomes deeper and muddier until a black ooze covers the floor of the chateau where Ouine lives. The young cowherd, attempting to deliver a message from Ouine, gets lost in torrents of water. Think of the two mouchettes we read about who took their lives in water. Ouine is described like a fish in a muddy pond. He calls himself a jellyfish at the bottom of the sea. He has a massive body of pure fat with no muscle tone, feminine, like the body of an aged woman. His hands feel slippery to Steenie. When Ouine tells Steenie in one of the opening scenes, "I will teach you to love death," his is a pedagogy of boredom and eventual nothingness. The world has no end, he tells Steenie, meaning there is nothing greater than oneself to seek, no standard to be measured by, nothing that deserves our commitment, and certainly no heaven. Thankfully, Steenie will resist and break free from the master. Indeed, for all its bleakness, Monsieur Ouine ends on a happy note. With this, we should remember Steenie's innocent friend, Guillaume, a cripple and the grandson of de Vendôme, who remains after Steenie's initial visit with Monsieur Ouine to warn him to stay away from the former professor. Only later do we learn that Ouine, as a fatherless schoolboy, was molested by his teacher. And we are reminded that Ouine was once an innocent child who now seeks to replicate the violence he once suffered. Yes, in Monsieur Ouine, the patient reader has to suffer too, along with the narrator, the characters, and the community he describes. In this, Bernanos stands in good company. Dostoevsky comes first to mind, but also Melville, Faulkner, Cervantes, Thomas Mann, Proust, Joyce, O'Connor, Kafka, and Cormac McCarthy. Monsieur Ouine jumps from one scene to another with few transitions and little contiguity. He destroys what he appears to affirm. That is, Ouine destroys what he appears to affirm. Recall his talk with the curé. His seemingly kind words are actually an attempt to empty him of spiritual commitment. Madame Marchal, the midwife, has Ouine's number, quote, "The simplest thing in his mouth becomes unrecognizable. Thus, for example, he never speaks ill of anyone, and he is very good and very indulgent. Yet in the depths of his eyes, you still see something making you understand how ridiculous people are. And if you take away that ridiculousness, you lose interest in them. They seem empty, and life itself seems empty. It's a great empty house where everyone enters one after another, but they never meet. Characters begin speaking who are not identified until pages later. Scenes are often a nightmarish jumble, such as the attempt of the chatelaine, the lady of the manor, Jeanne de Lane, or Woolly Legs, to kill Steenie, and the sudden emergence from the woods of an injured woodcutter from Alsace. The suicide scene of the young married couple, Eugene and Helen, feels perfunctory, particularly because Eugene is one of the two innocents in the novel, the other being Guillaume. The night of the old man of Vendôme, the night before the suicide, he visits Eugene, is also minimalistic. We are not made aware whether or not Vendôme has considered his daughter's fate if her husband kills himself. His only thought is for protecting an imagined nobility in the eyes of others who never cared for it in the first place. We see that no one except Steenie cares about finding out who actually killed the young boy. Only the priest and Jeanne de Lane appear to care about the child's death. The mayor sees it as a threat to his personal status, while a gendarme starts snoring while sitting next to the displayed corpse. The doctor views the boy without compassion, only as a specimen to be examined. The villagers, so anxious to put the boy's death behind them, rush to judgment of an innocent man. Ouine doesn't care. And he knew the little hired boy from Malacon who brought the milk to his home each evening. And Ouine is the one who sent him out on the evening errand that led to his death. Steenie, too, is a child in potential danger when Ouine turns his arresting gaze on him. As one Bernanos critic puts it, quote, "The fate of the children in the novel's World of Old Men is the most haunting theme of Monsieur Ouine. But that is at least in part because it is so closely related to the inevitable decay of a world that does not treasure and protect its children." Let me repeat that. Because it is so closely related to the inevitable decay of a world that does not treasure and protect its children. Remember that Steenie grew up in a lesbian household. It's been called a lesbian love nest, with his mother and his English governess forming a tighter bond between themselves than the natural mother has to her son. She sees her son as the reincarnation of her much hated husband, who supposedly died but did not, and ended up in an asylum. Nobody knows really where. And she is intent that this son, this Philippe, the same name of her husband, will not grow up to be a man. When he rides away in the carriage with Jeanne de Lane, Woolly Leg, it is because he wants to escape from, to echo the curé in his sermon, a dead home. But he faces the danger of a corrupted and cold-hearted village, quote, "The thin blonde road twining around itself like a viper going nowhere." You will recall that both Mouchettes came from similarly dead homes, and Ouine himself came from a dead home. Ouine, the main character, is a master of deception, so much so readers have to distinguish between his lies and his unexpected moments of honesty. The most surprising moment of all comes on his deathbed. Quote, "I can now see to the bottom of my own depths. There is nothing stopping my gaze. No obstacle is in the way, and there is nothing there." The dying Monsieur Ouine, when forced to look at himself for the first time, concludes, "It is I who am nothing." The curé's sermon in chapter 13 at the funeral of the murdered child is, for me, the apex of the novel. When the curé of Funul announces, quote, "The parish is dead," the curé, who has already been shown to be weak, becomes the voice where nothing is held back, nothing is moderate, mannerly, or appropriate. Bernanos is speaking prophetically through this preach to this curé, to the entire church and all its parishes. The message, sadly, remains relevant. He began Monsieur Ouine in 1931, but left it unfinished to write The Crime, published in 1935, and The Diary of Country Priest, published in 1936. He only finished it in the jungle in 1940. Thus, the priest's sermon had already been written before Bernanos saw the church sell its soul once again. The Vatican applauded the 1935 invasion of Ethiopia by Mussolini's fascists. The church and the Vatican also applauded the rise to power of Franco's Phalange Party, 1936. Both dictators used the name of Christ to justify the imposition of their power. Bernanos observed the growing genocidal violence of the Phalange from nearby Mallorca, which must have reawakened his gruesome memories of the World War I trenches when he remarked, "The Spanish experience is probably the principal event of my life." Given what I've already said about the impact of World War I on him, I think this comment refers to the impact of the Spanish Civil War on his relation with Action Française, which also supported Franco, but also, and I think more importantly, on his belief in any kind of political solution, especially from the political right, to his country's moral and spiritual decay. I think this is why he decided not to join de Gaulle's government after the war as Minister of Education, because he knew things had already gone too far for even a reconstituted French government under de Gaulle to make any difference. The subsequent decline of France's Catholicism, forecast by Bernanos, among others, has been well chronicled and was punctuated by the philosophies of deconstruction and postmodernism, both French-born, that emerged from the slime in the late 1960s. Ouine's view that the world has no end was made into a philosophy and exported to the United States, where it has been embraced fully by secular academics in search of a cause. The narrator of Monsieur Ouine describes the words of the cure emerging, quote, like a sword from its sheath. This is the same cure who displayed moral weakness in handing over the letters of his parishioners to Monsieur Ouine upon his request. However, like Steenie, whose seduction by Ouine begins the novel, the cure recovers himself from Ouine's tempting as he approaches the coffin of the raped and murdered boy. Overcoming Ouine's deceiving pleas for moderation and his attempt to drive him to despair, the cure delivers what must be one of the most powerful messages in all of Bernanos' oeuvre. Quote, "What said the poor man with his sad voice? What have you come looking for this morning?" Remember, he's standing near the coffin. "Why are you asking your priest? What are you asking your priest to do? Prayers for this dead child? But I am helpless without you. I'm helpless without my parish, and I haven't got a parish. There's no more parish here, my brothers, just a commune and a priest, and that's not a parish." As I said, this message, sadly, remains relevant. We can understand here why Hans Urs von Balthasar entitled his book Bernanos, an ecclesial existence. The priest's description of his village, this is all in chapter 13, extends to the whole of Europe as Bernanos sees it in the wake of the First World War. A judgment that will be confirmed by France's pathetic attempt, and England's for that matter, to appease Hitler in 1939. And its even more pathetic attempt to counter the blitzkrieg of Hitler's armies in the Second World War. The cure at the grave of the young boy, his boots covered with mud, connects his village to all of humanity. Quote, "They are always talking about the fire of hell, but no one has ever seen it, my friends, for hell is cold. It used to be that the nights weren't long enough to wear out your malice, and you got up each morning with your breast still full of poison. But now the devil himself has withdrawn from you. Ah, how alone we are in evil, my brothers. The poor human race dreams from century to century of breaking that solitude, but it's no use. The devil, who can do so many things, will never succeed in founding a church that will put in common both the merits of hell and the sin of all. From now until the end of the world, the sinner will have to sin alone, always alone. For just as we die alone, so also do we sin alone. The devil, you see, is the friend who never stays with us to the end. The devil, you see, is the friend who never stays with us to the end. Yet in the novel, there are those other than Ouine who celebrate the decomposition of Christianity. As Dr. Malpine says to the mayor, quote, "The hour is coming when, on the ruins of the old Christian order, a new order will be born that will indeed be an order of the world, the order of the prince of this world, of that prince whose kingdom is of the world. And the hard law of necessity, stronger than any illusions, will then remove the very object for clerical pride so long maintained simply by conventions outlasting any belief. And the footsteps of beggars shall cause the earth to tremble once again. Therefore, Monsieur Ouine should not be read as primarily the drama of Steenie's struggle with his master, Ouine, or the detective drama Who Killed the Young Cowherd, or the struggle of Jeanne Delaine to free herself from servitude to Ouine. It is a novel about the entire village of Finot, a community whose lack of faith is embodied by the mud, water, and filth that engulfs the town. And the village itself represents the whole of human society. Bernanos once referred to his novel as Job's dung heap. His nothingness, that is, Ouine's nothingness, we are shown is not absolute, cannot endure, because nature, representing by the morning sun that Ouine so detests, as abhors a vacuum, that sun has its analog in the thirst for purity that inhabits the heart of every man and woman, regardless of their moral or spiritual status. This thirst, which could be called the natural love of the human creature for his creator, is the ground of any future redemption, any transformation of a village into a true parish. This thirst is the ground of hope, the hope for salvation. The much admired French Catholic writer René Girard commented, Bernanos's apocalyptic vision was not pessimistic, since it gave a meaning to evil. Knowing its meaning, then, we are equipped to fight it. We fight every impulse to conform to the world, its expectations, its standards of success in life. We fight the isolation of modern life, its loneliness, hearing cries of desperation and responding. We must put our hope in the creation of a true parish-centered or church-centered community, where despair and cynicism, the will to self-destruction, can be met with the embrace not only of acceptance, but also a shared aspiration toward life's true end, eternal happiness with God. But the fight cannot even begin if we do not recognize the depths to which we have fallen, how much our institutions have become the enemy, the purveyors of nothing. We must be uncompromising, unwilling to settle for half measures or outright dismissals. The battle, in fact, is beginning to rage. One thinks that Bernanos would applaud this and tell us that each of us must be a part of it. I want to thank you all for taking this journey with me. Though challenging, I hope you will agree it has been worth it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
I had this, it's funny, the evening after the last class, I was walking up the stairs from class, and I thought of the line that we had discussed, that Ouine was going to teach Steenie to love death. I thought, that's it. Death is nothing. Death is nothingness. So what I began to piece things together from there that had been presented in slightly in different language. And I began to look at Ouine's rhetoric as completely deceptive and all the time, being something other than what was being said. Because Ouine was hard to grasp because he tried to appear as Madame Marchal said, he tried to appear so loving and generous, so kind. But yet, as she said, if you look into his eyes, you saw the ridicule which he had for everyone. And you see in those, last 3 chapters of the book all take place in Monsieur Ouine's bedroom, all of them. And they contain much information that we haven't known about the story and the village and so forth from Madame Marchal. We find out a lot of background information. It's as if the narrator is saying, okay, I'm going to let you in on some things that I've not been saying. And we find out Steenie himself has seen through Ouine. And why? I think it's partly because he has his own suspicions about who killed the little cowherd, because he knows that Ouine knew him well. He knows that a set of his clothes were in Ouine's closet. He knows that the boy delivered milk to Ouine every evening. He knew what Ouine did to him the first night they got together. They got him drunk. He felt the power. He felt like he had discovered perhaps another father figure, and he felt he had a master. He felt the power. But as he saw the village disintegrate, as he dismissed the pleas of his friend, his only true friend, Guillaume, but he didn't really dismiss it. He heard it. He also heard the pleas from Woolly Legs. He also saw with his own eyes the impact that Ouine had had on Anselme. He remembers hearing Ouine say, I learned all their secrets. And that's code language for, I found out their weaknesses and I used them against them. I use those, that's the code language. And all that Ouine can comment upon after visiting the dying Anselme is the smell. This gangrenous smell. And I think when I read chapter 13, I had to put the book down. I was so touched, blown away, as it were, by the sermon of the curé. That's something. That is worthy of our recommending it to others. Even without the novel, they can read chapter 13. And the idea that a priest can't be a priest without his parish. The priest is deprived of his power without the people. The idea that there is no parish if there's just a priest. There's no parish if there's just a priest with people who come out of cold obligation and then are there only to be seen by others, so to speak, who all park their cars rear end first so they can get out of the parking lot faster than anybody else. You know, I never saw that till I started going to Catholic churches. I never saw that at a Protestant church, any that I ever attended. And the greatest disappointment I've had as a Catholic, which I became at the age of 34, and I'm 73, so that's coming up on 40 years, is the lack of joy. The sense that people are worshiping out of duty. The sense that people have a set of rules which they know they must follow for salvation purposes. And they do no more than that. There's no overflow. Now, I'm generalizing. Lots of people don't fit that description. You know, the music is embarrassing. The music which should raise people up to joyful, prayerful contemplation, drags you down to the level of pop culture. Drags you down, not even it's a pop culture that died 30 years ago and is gone. It wasn't good music then, and it's not only not good, it's also desiccated. But yet 99% of parishes use it. And we think it doesn't matter. Those of us who like good music, we try to tell each other it doesn't matter, because so-and-so over there may really get something out of it. But what you have to realize is that there's only so much you can get out of an unworthy vessel. An unworthy vessel becomes something that you quickly have emptied and you own it. It's no longer, when you encounter it again, it no longer feeds you. It's familiar. It makes you feel comfortable, which is the very definition of kitsch. We serve kitsch in our worship. But yet we shrug our shoulders and say, there's nothing I can do about it. And Father isn't going to do anything about it. There's no money in the budget for anything different. And plus those group of people over there in the music program, you can't throw them all out, can you? Boy, they don't want me to become the priest. So we sacrifice, we compromise, we embrace pop culture, as it were, we transform, we restate our beliefs in a form that we think more young people will be attracted to, when just the opposite is the case. Young people are idealists. Young people don't want to encounter the familiar. They want to encounter that which challenges them, that makes them want to work, makes them want to mount the steps towards something better. We don't have any Palestrina. We don't even have the great Magnum Mysterium of Hudson, one of the greatest pieces of sacred music written in the last 30 years. We have some chant, poorly sung. Homilies. The performance of the liturgy itself. There are places you can go. There are places I have been where the liturgy, you can feel the liturgy transforming you, lifting you up, helping you to pray. There's this great line at the beginning of Hans Urs von Balthasar, Hell Herrlichkeit is glory of the Lord. It says, you who purse your lips at the name of beauty will one day not be able to pray or love. And he meant it. So that's kind of tangential, but it comes around to the question that Bernanos is raising in this novel. And that is, on the one hand, we've fallen so far, we've fallen so low. And we're no better off as a church, as a Christian community than we were in 1930. Secularism has only grown. Church attendance has plummeted. Universities have cast out most of their believing professors. They have a curriculum now that begins with, for example, at Mount Holyoke, a woman has come public about her education at Mount Holyoke, and all-women's school up in Massachusetts. First thing they asked the freshmen to do was to shave their head in order to neutralize their sense of gender. And after 4 years in college, she was completely alienated from her parents. And the mother put her in deprogramming. It took a while, but she came out, and now she's speaking out about what happened to her at Mount Holyoke. That's happening everywhere. There are exceptions, of course, but it's pervasive. I mean, our own, the Catholic colleges, over 200 Catholic college university, it's going on at most of them. So we begin with understanding what Monsieur Ouine conveys about the law, the impact and the consequences of the loss of faith. But what does he affirm? He affirms that within all of us, there is that, he calls it the desire for purity, which goes back to his understanding of childhood, the innocence of childhood as representing the best of us, the best we've known and experienced. I call it the infinite desire for God, or the desire for the infinite, but it's infinite in the sense that it can't be destroyed, no matter how much woke stuff they saddle your mind with. The infinite desire for God is implanted in us. It's like a fire hose that nobody can turn off. It's a desire for happiness. Another way of putting it, you can't turn it off. And because you can't turn it off, there's always hope. But because you can't turn it off, it can always also lead you terribly astray. And you can take that desire and think, okay, if I fill up all my bookshelves with books, like Stan has done, I'll be happy. Or if I fill up this bookshelf with all the books I published, I'll be even happier. Or if any of the things that we set before us as idols. But what would happen if we all took Bernanos totally seriously? I think we would become very, we would rock the boat a lot. Is that fair to say? And our straightforward lack of compromise, lack of understanding would isolate us. But at some point, and I think it's already starting to happen, those who have isolated themselves have started a kind of ground fire. You see it in school board elections. You see it in parents taking over decisions about textbooks, about curricula, they've learned the importance of publicly exposing the ideological dictators that run our schools. You see it in the split in the United Methodist Church. You see, you've already seen it in the split in the Church of England. Years ago when they went south, the Anglo-Catholics were born. And my good friend Mary Montgomery was an Anglo-Catholic. A name you should know if you don't. And that's why the Missouri Synod Lutherans are so distinct among all the Lutheran denominations. I mean, I could go on. I mean, look what's happening on Twitter. Look, if you look at the map of America and look at the red versus the blue, unless you look far left and far right, there is no blue. Of course, there's a lot of blue far left over there where you live, Alex. And but I think that these especially these women, these mothers who have just said they're going to take everybody on. They're the spark. They've ignited something. So I think, Yeats had this line in his famous poem, Alex, help me, or Stan or somebody, crawling toward Bethlehem, waiting to be born. Who's got that?
It's slouching, right?
Slouching.
Yeah.
Are you looking it up, Nicole? Okay, well, turn on your audio when you find it.
I will.
Read us the whole poem.
All right, I got it. I don't know how to screen share, but I can read it.
Just read it.
Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. Somewhere in sands of the desert, a shape with lion body and the head of a man, a gaze blank and pitiless as the sun, is moving its slow thighs, while all about it reel shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born.
So I guess the question I want y'all to discuss with me for at least a few minutes is what René Girard said about Bernanos not being a pessimist because he found the meaning of evil. Blaze. Does that strike you as accurate or plausible?
Not a pessimist because he found the meaning of evil. I mean, I believe so. I mean, I think a lot of I think that's one of the things that especially you see on these things is that because we mentioned several times, I think, in the course of you've reached the lowest you can, but there's always some kind of light of redemption that's always there, or at least alluded to. I think particularly in this one, there's a lot of ambiguity, but despite all that, it's always there, and I think that's intentional on Bernanos's part. So in that sense, yeah, I think I would probably agree with that statement.
Brittany, what do you think of that statement?
I honestly don't believe that I completely understand what is meant by such a statement, other than, well, that when you're young, really young, you can't wait for your life to start, and you want the answers, and you want these answers. It'd be even tempting to consult things we should not consult to get answers, right? And then when you get older, and it's like hearing my grandmother talk, and she would just be like, I have the answer, you're just not going to like it. So I think it's like, well, when you understand that it's just not what you wanted to hear, and you need to deal with it. That part I understand.
I think that's well said. Because nobody wants to hear what Bernanos is saying here. Who wants to think we live in that kind of world, that kind of society? The mud, the slime,
Mhm.
We don't want to think we're there. Alex, where are you on this?
First, Girard mentions Bernanos in quite a few books, but
Right.
typically just as a linking him to Shakespeare or Dostoevsky, or talking about demonology and the like, or in Battling to the End, his last book. It sounds like you've got a more extended treatment that
I do.
What is that? What book is that from?
You want me to put it in the chat?
I have all of them digitally. I can.
No,
look
I'm
it up
talking
quickly.
about the Girard quote.
Yeah.
It's it's substantial. I haven't had my chat open, so now I do.
Well, I think I would
Dan, you're just the man. That's all I can say.
I have to say that your presentation was really terrific. I want to thank you for that again. And you highlighted a number of things that I noticed in a second reading, which is the contrast between this new pedagogy of Monsieur Ouine, which is a pedagogy of perversion, of weakness, of manipulation, where his students would follow him to the end of the world. But as you say, that means two things. There is no end means two things. It's, there is no teleology, and there is no end to what he would drag them through, except that he might leave them in the end like Satan, as a friend who doesn't stick around. But then contrast that with the cure's one moment of joy, which was when he went into the garden at the seminary and found his family. He had a community that gave him pure joy,
Right.
and that's the high point. And then he's sent out into the world where people are fitting in like worms in fruit. And their day, but even if it's worms in fruit, they can still do a good day's work, and they can be satisfied with that. A good day's work is a beautiful thing. But his day doesn't end, and his parish is dead, and no one, and it's so dead that the boredom, unlike our first encounter with boredom as dust settling down on everyone, this time it's an ooze. It's a thick liquid that covers them and drowns them out, so that even in the testimony of the trial, a woman says, "I can't even tell you what happened. I was so bored. I was so covered in. I was so bored. I can't even, don't even ask me, because I'm not even living." So that contrast is really. So I'd say your question about innocence and hopefulness is that, again, as you said, if there's one parish left, if the Holy Spirit is still among two of us, then we still have hope. So I think Bernanos is right there in that tradition, fully embracing it. And as I didn't know about Job's dung heap, which is awesome. But as long as even when we're in Job's dung heap, Job will want an answer, but he's not giving up.
Nicole.
I think I'm kind of on the fence between the two positions. I could see him being an optimist on the scale of individual souls, if that makes sense. We see cases.
All the Giraud said he wasn't a pessimist. He didn't say he was an optimist.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess maybe the two perspectives balance out. He does seem to be an optimist for individual souls. Like I took Steenie in this book as an example of maybe more of an optimistic case, and even to some degree the cure in this book.
Right.
But on the other hand, he seems to believe that society, the way that the direction that it's moving in, is not a good one, and he doesn't seem to point to any sort of a redemption for society or indicate how that might occur. And even the redeemed souls, I'll say, they're kind of operating in solitude, getting to what we talked about earlier. Steenie is completely isolated from the cure, and you don't really see connections between the people that are maybe on a better path. So
only between maybe Steenie and Guillaume, and also the
Right.
relationship of Helen and Eugene, who end up killing themselves.
Right. So I didn't take Helen and Eugene to be a particularly positive case. I think Steenie and Gilliam, that's a good point. But overall, I guess I could see him not being a pessimist. But yeah, definitely not an optimist.
No, not an optimist at all. But there is hope there. And I mean, Steenie, after all, resists, right? And the cure resists. And not only cure resists, he becomes a real prophet, and that sermon is just, I mean, I've read a lot in my life, but that was one moment reading that chapter I will never forget. Stan, where are you?
Well, I'm more with Nicole and Brittany, I think.
You just want to be with a woman.
Well, that's true, but Russell Kirk said this about Eliot. Russell Kirk said that you cannot desire heaven unless you really understand what hell is. And he said Eliot gave us back hell, that before Eliot, we had this idea that Earth could be heaven, and then World War I destroyed that for us. And so then we began to live in a world where hell was a reality. And I think particularly if we see the prophecies of the sermon preceding the horror of World War I, that what Bernanos is doing for us is that he's showing us the depths of nihilism. And I think what he's doing, I think he's showing us the drying up. He's showing us the mud. He's showing us the slime and saying, this is where you're headed. Now, that is obviously not optimistic. Whether it's pessimistic.
But aren't you at an advantage if you know its meaning?
Yes. You absolutely are at an advantage if you know its meaning. And all truth is God's truth. So if we understand that this is the direction that culture is leading, we understand this is the angle of nihilism, and we grasp it 50 years before we see it come to fruition in our own time.
We never thought it would be the daily bread of colleges and universities and
The
public.
daily bread. My goodness.
I mean, my Lord.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, what are we teaching? Except that there is nothing. That's what we're saying. There is nothing. There can't be nothing.
We're saying America is a rotten place. We're saying that the man-woman family is not standard. We're saying that you can murder your unborn children. In fact, you should. The list is long. Craig, what would O'Connor think of this discussion? Turn on your audio.
I think she would relish the discussion. I struggled digesting these 4 novels. And I finished the class thinking, God, I want to go back and read every single one of them. But it was like an escalating portrayal of evil, the devil, as each novel unfolded. And Monsieur Ouine, I think, is the devil all over the place. I need to go back and revisit the sermon you described in chapter 13 and let it soak in a little bit. And I really need to reread all 4 of the novels. But I've been spending the last 3 years digesting, 30-page short stories by Flannery O'Connor. So to face something as complex, stark, chaotic as these.
Craig, you know what I ended up doing with this book? Writing an outline of every chapter.
Yeah, I know that, and I thought that was great.
Because it gave me a sense of what the hardware was in the novel.
Yep. I see the benefit of that. I wanted to do it. I just didn't find that. I didn't have a cycle to do it. The other comment I'll make is that as I was digesting kind of our conversation, I thought about Bernanos's cumulative portrayal of the devil and evil in these 4 novels, and mentally compared them to the portrayal of the devil as he evolves in The Violent Bear It Away. And for what it's worth.
Pretty damn close.
Yeah.
I mean, what happens in The Violent Bear It Away is like right out of The Village of this novel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it involves rape and even worse, incest. Leah, are you listening? Can you make a comment?
I am listening, yes. I will say, though, being pregnant and lying down is a bad combo. I fell asleep for a few minutes.
Whatever
So that was after your lecture, which was wonderful. And I was wondering, is that something that we could get a copy of, perhaps?
I'll post the recording bit of the class, but if everyone's okay, we might post the lecture as a podcast.
Please
Oh,
do.
great. Yeah.
Please.
That'd be awesome. So I'll post the recording on the course page, but then it'll also probably come out as a podcast.
Great.
Where do you find it as a podcast?
Oh gosh. Well, it'll be on the website.
Okay.
I'm not sure when it will come out. I know that Larissa, who does all the podcasts, she has like a lineup of
Okay.
uh
Oh, you can move me to the
but,
front. Move me to the front.
I can let you guys know for sure.
Um,
If you don't want to wait till then, probably, well, in a couple days, I'll have it. If you go to the course page and then if you click the course page for this course, and then if you click the week 8,
if you
Second.
want to just send me,
it'll be there.
if you want to send me the digital file of the whole class, I can cut the podcast out and send it back to you. You know,
Yeah, I mean, I do it anyways for the
very easy. To do. Yeah. Okay. You can do it.
no worries.
Thank you for that, Leah. So I want to thank again, everybody. I feel like you are the we happy few of this class because we lost about half our people. And I understand that. This is rough. And this was hard for me too. You know, I read Diary of a Country Priest years ago. I read Joy. I read Mouchette. I watched the Bresson movies. But I never really dug. You know how you can have an author you admire, but never really take them on for real. And so this was a great opportunity, only to find out that, wow, you start digging there and you go down and down and down. So you'll let us know when you post the class and the podcast?
Yeah, the class will go up first, but then I'll send a message on the course page.
Okay, and is there anybody want to say anything before I say goodnight?
Thank you. Just thank you. Well done.
Yeah, excellent class, Steele. Thank you so much.
You guys were, like I say, you ought to get a little medal that say, I survived the Bernanos class.
And I'm sure Julie would have loved to be here. She is still, her father's funeral was just this last Saturday, and she's it's a little tough for her at this point.
And I know Claire's at her son's basketball game, so what can you do? I drank port with Monsignor Ouine. I love that. Monsieur, what I'm doing the Monsignor thing. Monsieur Ouine. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hudson.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Bye.